and wants to keep a mission statement of to change the world. And Power Platform is key to doing that by putting data enabling people and giving people the ability to build applications. And that's very akin to ANS's ethos. So we're on a mission to digitally enable everyone, and that's every person everywhere, and that's right from the top down. So just talking about digital enablement, I just want to talk about how we approach Power Platform, Power Application builds. So we use the Microsoft Catalyst idea framework, and what we do is break the idea down into 4 different sections. So the first thing we do when we look at a Power App, or what the Power App's going to do, is look at the inspiring stage. So what does the application need to achieve, and what does what can we achieve on the Power Platform? From there, we're going to a discovery phase where we'll look at what's the business value, what's going to drive real impact for the business and the application, and what value is it going to give to our users. From there, we go to an envisaging stage where we build demos of the application, we'll do designs and look at what integrations we need to power the application. And then we go into achieve which is creating the application. So always start with the data and building data out in the Dataverse, and then build the applications on top of that, and then reporting that comes naturally with it. So we always take this approach. So I recommend copying this framework when you're building Power Apps. So a quick high-level overview of the Power Platform. Always start with data. So data and Dataverse has got built-in security. So it's AD security. So all AD authenticated. You've got logic built into it as well. So logic allows you to build out applications. So almost if this then that functionality with data, as well as plugging into different services. Then we've got data coming into that as well. So we can get as part of the Dataverse. Need to not call it CDS. As part of the Dataverse, we can build complex data systems without writing any code. So Dataverse is a very GUI-driven access into logical data. And then storage of that data. So whether it's structured data or unstructured data in files and images, it's got an API integration to that storage layer. So you don't particularly see that, but you'll store anything, whether it's structured or unstructured. And then the integration points as well. So it's really easy to integrate data to either import or export data, and it can give you Excel-like import and export capabilities, as well as native integrations. So it's a really powerful tool, is Dataverse. It's where I always start with an application. Then once we've built out that data layer, then we think about the applications and services that sit on top of that. So Power Apps aren't just apps. There's a number of services that drive this. So on top of Dataverse, with all the data connectors and AI builds that come with that, you've got Power BI. So natively Power BI will sit and work with this application. But Power Apps as well. So Power Apps is split into 3 different functions. You've got Canvas apps, which are those mobile native, beautiful looking applications. You've got model-driven apps, which are those very business functional applications that follow a process, and you've got portals as well. Portals for external access, should have added that. Power Automate, or used to be called Flow, is the glue that holds it all together. So Power Automate, as a data or function runs in an application, Power Automate can then kick off another process or function. And then you've got Power Virtual Agents, which is a bot style integration or exposure into the Power Apps and Power Apps services. So that's a very quick overview of the Power Platform. Mark, do you want to hand over and just take that from a Microsoft point?
Sure. Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you so much, ANS team, for having me today to speak a little bit on, I guess, our partner view. So as I mentioned earlier on, I come from Microsoft's partner team, so one commercial partner. So I had the really awesome opportunity of working with partners such as ANS around Microsoft strategy, how and why we're so excited about the Power Platform. And I was going to spend, I think I've got 20 minutes just really sharing some of that with you and Microsoft's passion behind this. And I guess a lot of this starts off, if I start from the top then, with this thing we refer to as the Big App Challenge, the Big App Gap Challenge, in other words. And by that I mean, recently we've seen this massive increase to demand for apps. Not only have we seen this demand for apps, we've seen a demand to have these apps quicker. So on the screen, you'll see there's a particular chart based on some data. I'm going to start from the year 2000. I feel it fits a little bit better for me. And you can see just in terms of the lighter purple, so that's the supply versus then the demand. So that the amount of actual apps people are asking for is growing and is going to get bigger and bigger as we go on. And being in the pandemic has already sped that up all of a sudden, because now we're no longer working in the office. We're more reliant on apps to shop, apps to order things, apps to return things, to book things. And naturally, this has had a massive effect on enterprises internally, on retail externally, as well as governments and agencies. So there's a really massive struggle now to meet this shortage. And the really clever people, people like Clarissa in the background who normally build these apps, that we can't get enough of them, meaning naturally we're running into this situation where there is a bit more of a shortage in how we get these. So we have this challenge, and the challenge we have is, if I explore it more, in the old days, or more traditionally, should I say, sorry, apps are built in a way that requires a lot of code. So maybe a lot of code heavy. So for people, it requires certain coding language, it requires a certain coding background, maybe even some experience to help us develop these apps. These people, again, are not massively in supply. So it means when we have these demands and we're still using that traditional approach to building apps, we're going to be in a situation where this gap challenge, this struggle to get these apps created, is going to be quite difficult to scale. So I guess Microsoft's approach to this is to say, hey, how can we take some of the cleverness from people like Clarissa and other pro devs and developers out there and bring some of that magic to people, say like myself, who are really great click and configure people, who are really great at maybe understanding processes. And if you give me a good screen and some buttons and show me how to configure something, I can build a really quick app to solve that problem. And that's really where then this Power Platform, this idea of a low code user base comes from. This slide here is a bit more of the explosion of the low code Power Platform base. And I guess I probably put this in the wrong order. So I'm going to jump a little bit forward here before I jump back in saying, well, as I mentioned, we have this massive challenge. And even when we look at people like Gartner, who I know a lot of us on the call will pop straight to the top right-hand corner to see what's going on, to see who are our leaders, our visionaries, we'll see very quickly Microsoft's low-code platform. So the Power Platform, the piece you heard from Adrian described as Yellow Excel, Power BI, that gives you the visualization and the business insights, alongside then things like Power Apps, so you can build these apps that can be available on mobile or tablet, Android, Apple, as well as a machine, so we can get things into people's hands much faster than alongside bots. But again, I said these are click and configure pieces with all of the data integration points helped for us by data connectors, as opposed to us having to write code, has just meant we can really empower our low code citizen devs, as we call them, who understand processes and want to get involved to build these apps. And Gartner's starting to pick us up in this example, you can see, is for a low code. And then another, a really big area, robotic process automation. So actually, I don't really need somebody to do that. I'd rather use their skills and their capability in a much more higher value way. How can I perhaps teach a robot through some sort of process automation to just do that on their behalf, make their job a lot more enriching, a lot more fun? And that was me jumping back to this other slide that should have been up front here, showing just last year being in this situation of lockdown and pandemic, where we see each other talking and hearing virtually, has seen this growth of apps. And someone mentioned in the comments, I can see flash up, a digital transformation brought forward and helped the Power Platform really grow in its success and help Microsoft's vision in saying, hey, this is our way forward. We can really fix this by putting this in the hands of our partners and in front of our customers to solve these issues, really comes to play and is powerful. And of course, there's always going to be a commercial it's great. I'm sure there's some financial people on the call, or those who will, of course, have costs at the forefront of their mind, especially again with the pandemic and everything going on. The Power Platform itself has been seen so far to drive really, really great ROI over the space of 3 years. So again, we love our Clarissas, our super pro devs, but if we can get some of this stuff developed in half the time, quicker, maybe still with them, because I'll come to a point a little bit later on where I talk about the space for our pro devs and how they add to this. But if we can make their job easier even, so we can reduce their development costs and the time it takes them, which actually equates to money, then actually it's a benefit to us all. There's a really great study here, and hopefully if you do get the slides, I'd implore you to click on it to learn a little bit more about how it's not only supporting digital transformation, but also actually supporting the bottom line in this pandemic we're living in and this new way of world we're going to be going towards. So let me touch on this whole concept of low code, pro code, this whole idea of build solutions in weeks, not months. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, and I'm going to break it down, because actually we're not saying, yes, there is a scenario where this is going to apply to everything. We're saying, no, there are some targeted areas that you can almost kind of lay out how I'm trying to do based on a level of complexity at the bottom, and then across at the right-hand side there, going to the top-hand side, how many users are going to use these apps. And the first really great place you can see these apps and where our partners are really helping is around that personal or team productivity. So time and expense apps, menu apps, apps to say kudos, great job to somebody else, apps to help you book meeting rooms, apps to help you understand where buildings are. These are great. These are really low code. They're great for people who understand the process and maybe don't need too much of an IT technical integration to build something that allows other people to gain some information. And then we can grow up that scale to then see, well, things like, let's say, a little bit more simple business use cases, where maybe there's a little bit more of an approval built into it. So actually now, yes, maybe I may need to lean on a power user or somebody in compliance who understands workflows or our internal processes. Or maybe now also, actually, I want to build something that's also available externally that maybe a colleague in the field can access. And then this is, I guess, the piece where we start seeing that personal, team and organizational productivity blend out to the work that our great partners like A&S do, which is, well, saying how can we really help you take this into more complex processes and data structures and define the governance and the audit and the compliance that may need to lay behind that. Maybe even in cases that I'm going to speak to you about, such as Virgin Atlantic, where you're almost layering this across your mission critical use cases. So yeah, Virgin Atlantic are a great example who use Power Apps, part of the Power Platform, and they've just used it to enhance the hostesses so that they know who's on the plane. Something we take for granted, which in the old days, I don't know if many people noticed, was done on a pen and paper. Whereas now they can have a tablet device and see your dietary options, your preferences, almost call you personally by your name to make you feel just a little bit special, that somebody somewhere thought, hey, I can do maybe starting off at this level with something that was a personal productivity thing to make their life a little bit more easier, that then went on to be a little bit more mission critical or an organizational wide initiative. But I build this out to show that it's not just an area that is for our citizen dev. Yes, we see a lot of attention there. Yes, 80% of our solutions do seem to come from here. But as those solutions grow across the level of complexity, or as they grow across into number of users, that's where we start bringing in our pro devs to leverage and extend the capability further. And that's the great bit, because the Power Platform is built on Azure. And Azure is our pro dev infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, which straight away gives you access to all sorts of extensibility that allows you to really turn something that may start as a personal productivity platform to maybe perhaps even an enterprise platform. Again, especially with some of the cool things we see coming out of our partner spaces. And I do want to jump into some customer stories. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them. I've only got a little bit of time here, and I do want to save some cool time for some demos. So if, again, when you have the deck, you have an opportunity to see this and have a look at what's been put in. The customer momentum that we have here is one that is really, really shared across that growth that I saw, that growth that we've seen coming across, and not only in the financial services, but also in travel and in local government and regional government here in the UK. Some that I would love to tease out and pick out a little bit more relevant to stuff that's going on here will be perhaps the example here of the Swedish Health Service, who've been able to use the platform to quickly allow them to monitor and manage particular scenarios that they're dealing with in regards to COVID. So that's supplies, that's bed inventory management and resources. So something that was stood up in quite a short space of time to help them deal with an immediate sort of situation. And I appreciate the love. Someone's picked up that this deck is a deck shared and loved by one of my beloved colleagues, or he's no longer a colleague of mine, Chris Huntingford. So I appreciate the love that you've picked up. We have the same message. Yeah, Chris is a big mentor of mine. He missed the Power Platform himself. So it's great to see some of his content and some of these cases recognized. So I appreciate the love in the comments. Another use case in terms of local regional government. So how, again, we're talking around COVID and how the Power Platform, so the whole idea of being able to build something quite quick, being able to leverage this extensibility, some of those bits you would have heard Adrian talk about, we got out of the box by leveraging the platform in terms of security, data, storage, and some of the workflow components to build solutions that help you to manage things such as capacity, supplies, staff, in this example. I'm coming a little bit closer to home, and I asked, they said they didn't mind me pushing this out there, but again, some work from A&S, which they've done with Bury Council, again, around the COVID times, is something that they wanted to get out super quick to help support some of the vulnerable in the area, and how we can get support to them through volunteering and as quick as possible. There's a great link to some work to here that was done by them. Some other great examples that I really wanted to tease out, especially with everything going on in terms of hopefully us going back to the office, or thinking about how we can return to work, some of those processes, how we can support our essential workers and our key workers, so our postmen, our delivery drivers, challenges like this, which you can see are being solved, again, using the Power Platform, just to help reduce admin where possible. Something as simple as telling somebody when they can come in or what time, be it just a workflow or a Power Automate flow that pings somebody an update via SMS to reduce the time that they're having to wait, or reduce the admin personnel time to ring somebody to confirm their time. And again, other examples around resiliency planning even. So we hear from our senior leaders in government that the vaccination program has a good momentum, it's going well. It's amazing to hear that behind the scenes there's loads of Power Platform being used to help facilitate these in terms of helping solutions get out there to help people manage things, in terms of helping create hubs for groups of volunteering or resourcing to go through, that's being used. As well as then some of the other pieces you may not know the Power Platform being as great for. So that's some of its portal capabilities. So a really quick way to stand up what we would normally refer to as a website that can just capture some information, process that information as maybe as a form, and do something with that, maybe attach it to a list, ping it to somebody, do some automation. We see that being used here to really help with stuff like claims. So, you know, that basic, I've got a capture, I need to process, I need an action to be done. That's great for our devs, as I said, but even greater for some of our citizen pro low code devs who want to be able to do this because it's click and configure, and they can help build this on our behalf. Those are a few examples. There are so many more. You'll hear come out very soon around really peak and pertinent areas that we are surrounded by in terms of our new life, our hopeful, positive life when we are able to get out. I know I've spoken quite loads about pandemic. It's Power Platform is used for loads more, I promise. I did mention retail, travel, hospitality. It's not just a COVID platform. But what I do want to do is hand over to Clarissa. I've been speaking about her loads to give you a practical example of what some of this looks like, and then how it can live as part of your Microsoft ecosystem. So this isn't just something that you build and just sits outside. These are apps that can live in places like Teams, where we're having this session, as well as SharePoint and other areas. Thank you so much. I hand over to Clarissa.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. Honestly, if you guys listening are anything like me, you've got loads of ideas just rattling around in the brain. But what we're going to do for this next section is really kind of dive in to one kind of use case in particular, and then we're going to show a demo of what that might look like. Because at the moment, it's probably a lot of just words. It's difficult to imagine just from hearing that what it could actually look like in real life. So the use case that I'm going to focus on is checklists. So many businesses are still using paper checklists, and actually a couple of years ago, a customer that I was working with, they had a forklift truck in the yard out the front, and the driver, every morning, he had to take a clipboard and a piece of paper out to his truck and try and fill in all this information about the health and safety, whether he'd done his checks to make sure it was safe to drive the forklift. And he had to do this in the rain, in the mud. He had to go back in after getting all his health and safety gear on, to then go away and grab the piece of paper that he forgot, take it back out. Once he'd filled it in, it then ended up getting popped on someone's desk for them to then file away in these huge filing cabinets. And then if there was a problem with the forklift, then they'd have to go back through all of this information to try and check, okay, was it actually checked that day? It was just a nightmare for everyone, all around, all involved. And you can kind of imagine that the annoyance and frustration and business pain of that guy who just wants to get on with his job. So one of the things that we offered to him, presented to him, was, hey, how would you feel if this was actually just an app on your phone and you just tap the buttons and you're free to go, you're on your way? And also for the management, then they'd be able to see that he did his checks, that he did his checks on time, and they'd be able to have a digital storage, so no longer be beholden to all of these filing cabinets which were just bursting with paper. They would have that accountability, auditability available quickly at their fingertips, and they wouldn't have to have this middleman pushing this paper around the office. But it's not just, you might be thinking, well, that sounds lovely, but I don't have any forklifts in my business. But it's not just something that's confined to this kind of scenario. Like, we've got multiple different other areas, lots of other sectors where something like a checklist will be used. If you're a retail store, you probably have goods being delivered in. You place an order and then you receive those goods, and you want to make sure that everything that you ordered has actually arrived, and that the order is complete. Or you might need to, if you're a food retailer, you might need to make sure that you can do compliance checks on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that your business is adhering to food safety regulations. In terms of like the education sector, you can have checklists for checking that all of the relevant admission steps have been taken for prospective students, just to make sure that all of those processes are being followed in the correct manner. And then if you're actually producing goods, you could use a checklist for example, quality assurance at the end of the line to make sure that everything is to your high standards before it leaves the factory. And those are just a fraction of the examples in which you could use this. And hopefully there are lots of you who will be out there thinking, oh yeah, we use a paper checklist in our company for this. And if that's something that causes a business pain, then this next section will probably be very, very interesting to you. Speaking of, the example that we're going to go through is, now that we've got lots of businesses returning back to the office, or beginning to make that transition to return back to the office, there are still guidelines that offices and business places, workplaces need to adhere to in order to make that transition safe. So we're going to have a look at a COVID-19 compliance checklist that will allow us to check whether our business is in line with the latest guidance. So if I just quickly change what we're seeing on the screen, our demo is actually hosted within Microsoft Teams, and hopefully everyone can see that here.
Yeah, we can see that.
Perfect. So this is a fantastic way of keeping Teams as your one-stop shop for productivity, but allowing people to actually access applications from that one place of productivity. So we'll go to the ANS configurable checklist tab at the top, and this will load in the app for us. And you can see there that the app is embedded inside the Teams window, but another thing we can do is actually pop it out into a separate tab. And this allows you to keep on keeping up to date with your chats and your meetings and your other teams while also utilizing an application. Also, we can resize the window, and you can see here that actually the application has been coded in such a way that it will respond to whatever size we make our window. So if we make that full screen so we can see everything, let's go in and have a look at what this actually looks like. So we've got our menu here, and we can see our COVID compliance example. And we'll just go through to the menu screen for that. Oh, apologies, the demo gremlins have hit us again. There we go. So we can see here we've got these different sections within the checklist. So these are the different checks that we need to complete, and the different subsections that those checks will sit in. And we can see we've got this kind of progress bar. And at the moment, we don't have any progress through. We can see how many questions we need to complete and how compliant we are based on those questions. So if we select one of those sections and we'll go into it, then we'll start to actually see some questions that we can start to answer. And now these are all based on, I just went through the UK Gov guidance and wrote these questions in. So we start off with coming to work and leaving work, and we can see that we've got these different questions and these different options, and we can go through and we can start to add our answers in. And we can see that that affects this counter down the bottom, which is tracking our progress through the section. And it's also telling us how compliant we are. So when we pick a no option for have we provided hand sanitizer, we know that that's not a compliant option. So we stay at 33% compliant. If we change that to yes, then we can see that we go up to 50% compliant, and so on and so forth. We can see once we've completed the entire section, then we can move on to the next section, or we could navigate to it quickly from the sidebar on the side here. And so if we tick through a couple of these, just to show the experience, what we might also want to do is be able to actually see some analytics on these values, because we're saving this data in, but we might want to actually see how compliant we are at a glance in all of these different sections. So we've got a view compliance option here. And when we select that, we can see we've now got this chart showing that gives us just a basic view of our percentage of compliance over these 4 different subsections within the social distancing for workers compliance section. We can also, if we go back to the questions, we can see that we're fully complete through that section. We've answered all of the questions, but we can see the sections that are not 100% compliant. And that can be really, really useful and really interesting. But what happens when the guidance actually changes? I'm sure we've all been aware of the fact that as we've been going through COVID, this kind of, especially these last few months, the rules change quite frequently. You don't want to be in a situation where you're beholden to your pro developers or your partner company like ANS who is producing this solution for you, you don't want to be beholden to them actually going in and making edits and making changes within the application and then republishing it. You want to be able to make those changes yourself and quickly. And this is one of the things that the Power Platform allows us to enable you to do. So the way that I've developed this particular application is that there's a configuration layer on the top. And this allows us to start actually making changes to these questions. Now, of course, what you'd probably want to do is restrict access to this configuration layer to individuals who are of a certain security level or in a certain role. But at the moment, we've just left that open so that everyone will be able to see. But we can go through and we can start to actually make some changes in the questions here. So say, for example, rather than saying, are you staggering arrival and departure times, we want to change that word for some reason to are you reducing the number of arrival and departure times at work, or increasing would be a better thing to do for COVID. And we can hit save on that question, and then we can go back to our checklist view and we can see that that's exactly the question that we added in. And more than that, what we can actually do is we can say, well, actually, we want to have another additional answer into this question. So rather than just yes, no, and not yet checked, we'll add another option in and we'll say not yet, plans in place. Excellent. So we'll save that option in, and now we can see it in our radio button option here. And when we go back to the view mode, we'd be able to select that button. Now, what if we wanted to make this not yet, but the plans are in place? What if we wanted to say that that was compliant enough to register as compliant across our business? Well, then we just use the is compliant tick to say, yep, that option is actually a compliant one. And now we'll see that if we go to no here, we've got 50% compliance. And if we click not yet, now we get to 67% compliance, because the system now knows, just because we've told it in that easy to configure screen there, that configurable layer, we've told it that that is a configurable option. Sorry, a compliant option. But what if actually we decide, we don't want to have that that not yet plans in place option? Well, we can just delete it out of the system. And if in their infinite wisdom, the government decide to add some more rules and regulations in, then we can just add another question. And that will go in here. And we can put in our additional question with our new. And we can save the question, save the option. I forgot to save originally, make that one compliant, go back to our view, and now we can see we've got our additional question. And the beauty of all of this is that what you can end up having is someone who is very close to the business scenario. So in this case, maybe it would be someone in your health and safety team, or someone who has actually been given the responsibility of reopening the office. You could give them the power to make these changes, make these configurations, and you would no longer be beholden to an IT department or a partner to actually enable those changes to go through. Instead, you have the power to do that within your own hands. Additional things we can do here is actually add new subsections, and you can see here, this is another thing that the Power Platform allows, or Power Apps allows you to do, is to have these pop-ups that come up, and we can add a new subsection into here. And now if we scroll down, we can see there's a new subsection, and it automatically populates it with a blank question for us to fill out. So this would be question for new section. Give that a save, and then new option. Give that a save, make it compliant. Perfect. And everything else is just following on from this logic. So this knows dynamically how many questions are within this section. Our charts over here know dynamically how many subsections belong to this section. And it takes those values that we add in as we add them in and produces these charts for us. And of course, this isn't quite as nice as the visualizations that you can get from Power BI, but this just goes to show that there's quite a lot that you can do just from within Power Apps itself, from Canvas apps. So there's a load of stuff that if you wanted to, and we're hopefully going to be able to open this app up to you guys if the number limitation allows. We're going to be able to give you access to this team, so you can go into this application and you can have a play around, you can make your own changes and see what that experience is like and see what that experience of using a Power App could be like. And hopefully this has kind of given you an idea of Power Apps, not as potentially what you've seen them before, which is a bit more utilitarian, but actually something that can have that native look and feel, something that looks like a full-blown application, that has the nice user experience that we would expect from modern applications, that has that configurability, that flexibility to allow your users to make changes without needing to know code, without needing to engage IT or a partner. This is the power of the Power Platform, is that in a very short space of time, literally, I think this took about 2.5 days to put together this demo. In that short amount of time, you can create something that will give you so much reusability and so much power and ownership over your own development and your own digital transformation. So I think probably it will be a good time to hop back to if there's any questions. I've just realized I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So if I just quickly stop the screen share there, we will see how we are for time.
Yeah, Clarissa, I've just been responding to some of the questions in the chat. If I didn't get through to them all, we will get there. We'll respond to all questions. But yeah, you're right. Let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions around Power Platform? So there's one just coming now. So about how the data is stored. Do you want to cover that in database?
Yeah. So for this particular example, the data is actually stored locally within the app, just so that all of you guys would be able to have access to that the COVID static data that is in there. But where we've utilized this sort of technology with or this sort of thing for our customers, we've stored everything in Dataverse. So we've put in place this data model, which allows us to have this flexibility where there are essentially question templates that the user can then enter and configure in Dynamics or within a Power App like you saw today. And then that would filter through, cascade through to all of the actual questions that each store or user would then be going through and answering. So I would recommend for a solution like this, in order to get that kind of level of configurability, the Dataverse is the best place to put that. Though there are other ways in which you could store your data. There are so many data sources that Power Apps connects to, and the Power Platform can talk to really nicely. So yeah, lots and lots of different options there for you.
Cool. Cheers, Chris. There's a question coming about licensing as well, and you're right. There is a premium license for Dataverse, and there is a reason for that. The database is a really powerful tool, and giving access to that data and being able to manipulate and model data in that fashion is really powerful, and what drives this platform. Mark,
and for Casper's question, sorry, this demo is licensed via Dataverse for Teams. So while obviously we say that Dataverse is kind of the goal for storing our data, obviously that is a premium connector and requires the power-ups per licenses, whether that's per app or per user. But what we do also have available to us is Dataverse for Teams, which only requires whatever license gives you access to Microsoft Teams. So usually that's an E3 license, but there's also a bunch of other licenses that also give you that capability. Now, in this instance, because we're using Dataverse for Teams, the app is built within Teams. What I can do is I can share it with anyone who is a member of that team, which includes external users. Now, what you would be limited to as an external user is only being able to see records that you have created in the system. And this is to help make sure that there's no data loss and that the security around your data remains in place. So in order to get all of this COVID data to you, we've just put that in locally into the application. But the idea remains that it would be extensible for you using the Dataverse for Teams capability. And yes, Tony, yeah, this was entirely capable with just an E3 license. So really, yeah, Dataverse for Teams is really bringing Power Platform to the masses, as it were, without having to have that barrier of licensing and entry.
So Mark Edwards has asked a good question. So he says, I noticed you're talking about mobile apps a lot. Is everything equally applicable to traditional browser-based apps? So do you want to talk about how you'd access Power Apps, Clarissa, particularly Canvas apps, and how they can be accessed via browser?
Yeah. So we've got a lot of different ways of accessing Canvas apps. It's not just mobile. Obviously, you saw today we can access it through Teams, and I was accessing it through my desktop version of Teams. You can also access it through the Teams web application. Also, with anything in the Power Platform, because it's all a cloud-based service, you can go to office.com and access all of your different applications. And for Canvas apps in particular, they are able to be surfaced through just a URL. So you could share that URL with other users. You could embed that Canvas app into a SharePoint page. You can access it you can embed it into a model-driven form in Dynamics. So there's loads of different ways in which you can access an application, not just through the Power Apps app on your mobile, but also through the browser. Hopefully that gives you enough ideas around that question.
Cool. To take a couple more, we've got Pete Self has asked, so if you're using Dataverse for Teams, can we still connect to things like Azure Data Lake and Synapse? I guess the answer is no, so you need a premium connector. So it'd be that premium license to create that connector.
Yeah, so as soon as you use something that is a premium connector, that kind of bumps you up to needing one of those premium licenses. But it's always a good, I think it's always a really good way for businesses to start to get to grips with the Power Platform, see what it could actually do for them. Because a lot of the time it's difficult to envisage what that digital transformation would look like, what would be the return on that. But if you've got a couple of applications that you can build for, cheaper licensing agreement like the E3, then you can start to actually have some data, some numbers behind you to say, actually, look, this is what this digital transformation is giving us. This is what we need for the next step. Is that return going to be enough for our business?
Cool. So Peter Nicholson has asked, how do you limit organizations' liability when anyone can collect and store data?
Yeah, so this is actually where we come into one of the most amazing things that Microsoft have released in recent years is the Center of Excellence for the Power Platform. And usually, what we do when we're talking with businesses, with customers, is we first focus on that business pain to give you that kind of idea of what Power Platform can do for you. And then if you decide to invest in Power Platform as a technology and as a service, then we would introduce you to the Center of Excellence. And this really allows us to, or allows you obviously to control that security across the whole platform. You can make sure that you can limit who can do what with different data, different connectors, how you can make sure that confidential data stays in its own little confidential bubble and doesn't get leaked out into the rest of your business or the outside world, which is even the most frightening scenario. I think, Aid, if you have anything to add about the COE offering that we provide.
Yeah, just to add things like that, not much. I think you could do quite well there, Clarissa. Just things like it can do things like limit connectors and flaws. So if you don't want people being able to create a connection to an external data source or send data externally, you can do that with COE. I'd highly recommend it, at least looking at Center of Excellence for some of those things. It does some more cool stuff as well around reporting, so it can look at uptake of applications and which users are accessing it, which users aren't. So you can get some feedback from the users that aren't accessing it and work out why, and then enhance the apps yourself and just make them more usable.
Yeah, as it says, you can track all the usage information, see things like API calls. You can start to see how many people are starting to build their own applications, and then maybe you can use that information to think about how we can then go in and encourage those users to use best practices, or how we can make sure that everything that they make is secure and is using a kind of common standard.
Cool. We're having a couple of questions around someone's taking a kept me falling off my own words, but we're having a couple of questions around Dataverse. So things like how is I think one was saying, how is Dataverse different to SQL? Go on, Clarissa. I'll unless you want me to do it.
Well, I'm happy to take it. So Dataverse is not just a database. That is the main thing to bear in mind. It's not a replacement for SQL or a replacement for SharePoint. It's an entire service. Everything that we produce really on the Power Platform is built on top of Dataverse. So it allows you to create a data model, which gives you the ability to structure your business's data in a way that makes sense to your business, and in a way that can power multiple applications. So that's really where the power of it comes in, is that you can create this bespoke data model that's suitable for your business, that can power an infinite number of solutions. On top of that, you can link in with Canvas Power Apps. You can use it to create model-driven Power Apps, business process flows, and it can feed the information into things like Power BI. There's, on top of that, also you have the security layer, which is part of the Dataverse. So I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison, and there may be some cases where SQL is a viable option, or even a better option in some scenarios. But that's kind of the core difference. The Dataverse is the whole service as a package.
Yeah, so there's things just on that. So when you build an application, you don't need to think about building those data tables out and the structure of data, and you do some relationships, but things like created by or edited by or last updated are all in there by default and are fields in a data table. So you don't need to think about some of those data structures. The GUI into it as well is really nice, really easy to use. It's something that anyone can pick up. I've challenged my mother to do it. She's the most technophobe I've ever met, and she could build or add data into it at least, which I was quite impressed with. There's quite a lot of questions around licensing. Yes, it's what's the right word for this? Complicated, depending on the solution.
Yeah.
It makes it easier if as an organization you've wholeheartedly gone to Power Apps and deployed that licensing across all users, and you've pretty much got access to unlimited applications. So it's kind of balancing that out. I'll put something in, I'll share something around about licensing and about the different types, but ultimately there's two different types. There's a per user license and a per app license that are both premium, that give you access to connectors and Dataverse. Clarissa, do you want to talk a little bit more about them? I think.
Yeah, sure. So so the per app license is kind of like your entryway into Dataverse as a premium. Obviously, the other stepping stone, one low below that, is Dataverse for Teams, which of course is attached to an E3 license, which is a license that many people will already have. But the Power Apps per user gives, Power Apps per app gives a user access to build and use a single app for a month, and that's £7.50 a month. And then if you want to have that user accessing 2 apps, then you buy 2 lots of that license, so that's £15 a month. And you'll find that once you get to 4 applications, it's the same price as the Power Apps per user license, which gives that user unlimited applications. So as soon as you get to 5 apps or 6 apps or 7 apps, you're actually no longer increasing your licensing cost, but you are increasing that gain that you're getting, because those users are able to use multiple different applications. So it's kind of you get out of it what you put into it, if that makes sense. So the more you engage in and actually utilize the Power Platform, the more it gives you back, and the more return you'll find. So I think that, as I said before, because these returns can often be very difficult to estimate, it helps to use some of those earlier steps on the ladder. So things like the Dataverse for Teams. If you already have Dynamics licensing, then you'll find you're ready to go. So things like that will give you an insight into those kind of returns that you can have.